El Salvador is a beautiful country full of diversity of every kind, from the plant life in the rainforest to the wildlife found only in Central America. From sea turtles to rare birds, it is stunning to see. The land is almost as diverse. Sprawling, pristine beaches flow into immense jungles, which then turn into sloping volcanoes. Additionally, the vibrant culture of friendly people lends it to being a fabulous travel destination, though few people think of it that way. Nowhere else on Earth can you find such a mixture of ancient ruins rivaling those found throughout Central America, juxtaposed with new traditions and combined with a welcoming attitude and a love of life. Yet, El Salvador is struggling with many social and environmental problems. Many of these problems stem from an almost total lack of a waste management system throughout the nation. This affects water, sanitation, agriculture, and basic quality of life. Over half of the population of El Salvador is in need of adequate housing due to the frequent occurrence of natural disasters. This, coupled with the terrible air quality caused by the burning of waste materials, and not to mention the pervasive malnutrition in children under 5, El Salvador is in a time of great need. The lack of access to water impacts the quality of life in El Salvador, and according to a survey carried out by the Salvadoran think tank Fusares, the rural poor in particular spend a significant share of their productive time collecting water. Families, and particularly women, may spend hours each day collecting water for their essential daily needs. Their drinking water often comes from untreated springs, streams, or wells, and local health clinics deal with high numbers of water-related illnesses such as amoeba infestations, infant diarrhea, and even death. Only 21% of the rural population has continuous access to potable water, and levels of fecal bacteria in drinking water range from 50 to 260 times the acceptable levels. 61% of rural water sources are contaminated with fecal bacteria, whilst 1 child a week dies from agrochemical poisons in their water supply. 83% of rivers are contaminated, and only 2.3% of sewage or industrial and domestic wastewater receives any kind of treatment before being dumped into the rivers and then collected as drinking water by the people. In addition to water and sanitation problems, there is a dire need for adequate housing. After being struck by the many recent natural disasters, from landslides to hurricanes, the housing need has increased rapidly in El Salvador, both in urban and rural areas. El Salvador is still in the process of rebuilding. According to data provided by the Vice Ministry of Housing, the country's current deficit totals 630,000 houses, or 51% of the total population. And that is not all. El Salvador also faces hunger and malnutrition. In fact, 16.3% of rural families in El Salvador cannot afford the basic food basket. Hunger keeps people in poverty by decreasing their ability to work, learn, and care for their families. Chronic undernutrition of children aged under 5 is 25.6% in rural areas, and nearly 50% in the most vulnerable and marginal locations. El Salvador only produces 15% of the food it needs because the most productive land is used for cash crops and sweatshops. Thus, most of its food has to be imported, which causes price increases that many cannot afford. And to top it all off, the only means of getting rid of waste materials in El Salvador is to burn or bury them, and most farmers have learned to clear their land by burning what is left of their crops after harvest. According to Luke Curtis in the article Biomass Burning from the Human Ecologist, biomass burning represents the largest source of air pollution in many rural areas of the developed and developing world. Globally, biomass burning is estimated to produce 40% of the carbon dioxide, 32% of the carbon monoxide, 20% of the particulates, and 50% of the highly carcinogenic polyaromatic hydrocarbons produced by all sources. These are some very pressing issues, but luckily, El Salvador and her people are on the brink of change. There are many organizations trying to create a better world for the people of El Salvador. The Permaculture Institute of El Salvador is among them, designing water catchment and agriculture systems that work best for the Salvadorans that need it the most. They have brought sanitary water to very remote locations and have saved children from going hungry, by teaching their parents techniques for farming that are becoming more and more successful each year. Habitat for Humanity El Salvador is another agent in this change. They build houses for low to middle income people who have lost their homes due to natural disasters and other hardships. They have made a significant contribution to the rebuilding of El Salvador. So far, close to 1,000 families have been helped by Habitat for Humanity El Salvador. As a social change organization, CONVIVAS hopes to combine these two models to create our own that involves building homes, protecting the environment, and providing Salvadorans with access to both sanitary water and the ability to grow their own food, all in a way that makes sense, which means using local materials, local labor, and a community effort to help one another. This project primarily entails building sustainable, affordable housing for low-income families in rural El Salvador. Because of the lack of waste management in El Salvador, we propose to use waste materials such as tires, bottles, and cans, using some of the methods created by Michael Reynolds, as well as local materials such as sugarcane bales in the design of typical straw building. This is the proposed budget for the first year of the project. It is broken down into 3 phases. The first phase of this project will entail a large-scale community needs assessment to determine the wants and needs of the people and to promote the idea of a new form of housing. Research will also be conducted on indigenous and local building methods, as well as how to adapt green and sustainable aspects to these methods. We will be researching the feasibility of different forms of water catchment and filtration, smart farming techniques, and willingness to participate in the training and volunteering. Adaptations to the project will be put in place regarding the findings of these assessments. After a community is selected and willingness to participate is assessed, a prototype house will be constructed with volunteers from the community after their initial training. Selection of volunteers will be based on their desire for owning a house, the ability to pay for the cost of the house over time and on a sliding scale, and the ability to contribute time in building and volunteering, and preference will be given to families. The training program will require a number of training hours in volunteering in building other community members' homes, as well as composting and gardening workshops. Once training is complete, they will be eligible to have their own home built. The program will also include training certain people to fix any technical aspects of the houses, such as the water catchment system. In the first year, we hope to accomplish building 10 houses, and each one will be fitted with a water catchment system, which will be connected to a filtration system where the water will be filtered 3 times, once for consumption, once for use for bathing and washing, and again for use in irrigation of plants. Composting toilets will be installed for each home, as well as a greenhouse or a yard space that could provide a good portion of the nutrition in the home through smart planting techniques. In order to carry out this project, we believe that it is essential to partner with organizations whose missions align with ours. This will form a strong network for a holistic approach to creating real sustainable change. These are some of the potential partners that we have identified to help us in this process. We have 3 sources for funding for the project that we would like to explore. Number 1, we want to partner with construction firms that build green and sustainable homes. We would propose that they ask their clients to donate 1% of the total cost of the firm's services to them in order to build a home for a family in El Salvador. Number 2, we will offer study abroad opportunities for college students or adults who would like to pay tuition to learn green building techniques and volunteer their time. Our last funding model is a microcredit system where people would give loans to a family to pay for a house, and the family would pay it back at no interest for a number of years. Houses built with waste and local materials such as sugarcane will reduce the massive amounts of waste being burned and buried every day. The ill effects of biomass burning are well established. Particulates from the smoke are small enough in size to be able to easily travel deep into the lungs, which can significantly increase levels of respiratory and heart problems. Thus, reducing the amount of biomass being burned will improve the quality of the air and reduce respiratory illnesses, which are pervasive throughout El Salvador. Using rain catchment systems and the filtration of that water will drastically reduce the rate of death and illness from contaminated water. The use of composting toilets will reduce infant mortality rates from 37 per thousand to 30. Women who usually spend on average 2 to 4 hours per day fetching water will be able to use that time for other activities. The ability to grow food will decrease malnutrition and lower the rates of hunger and increase productivity. In addition, CONVIVAS will attempt to develop a model that will be as stable as possible in order to increase the safety of the families in times of natural disasters such as earthquakes.
Blessed is this life. alive. Oh, and I'm gonna celebrate.